Hi, Dr. DeBoard here, going to give you some feedback on this most recent batch of papers. This was one of the hardest stacks to grade, so I did leave a good bit of feedback on everybody's paper to try to help you to make your optimal revisions for your final work in the course. It is a hard assignment to try to figure out what exactly we mean by a philosophy of Christian writing, and so here's some pointers that should help you revise for your best product. So one, you were supposed to write a philosophy of Christian writing. Several of you wrote more a philosophy of Christian living, on the value of truth, and a few people wrote on Christian literature or how to read as a Christian. So make sure my slide here pulled over a little bit. Make sure that you have a thesis in your paper that articulates your philosophy of Christian writing. And I want you to think about two things there. What should motivate a Christian to write? And so what is the motivation or perhaps the value? And how does a Christian do that? And I think that the motivation or the value is, for a lot of you, is going to be rooted in Scripture. It's going to be rooted in some of your Christian experience. But the how we do that, some of that is going to be rooted in what we have studied in this course. So a lot of you did a better job of writing about the value of writing as a Christian or the motivation to write as a Christian, but I saw less attention to how do we actually do that. Your paper structure. Look at the paper that you have written and submitted thus far. If you can go back and outline your intention for each segment of the paper, whether that's by paragraph, or by what you have identified as larger segments, if you can outline that and understand the direction of your argument and what the main idea was supposed to be of each section, then you've probably got a good structure. For several students, I could not tell where they were going or how one point was connected to another. Sometimes this is a problem with not having a thesis that provides strong direction, and sometimes it's just that maybe your writing tended to be more like you were brainstorming, you gritted the ideas on paper. So make sure you've got a good structure. Several people, I could not find this. You need to use the sources that you choose, and the instructions dictate a minimum number of 3 good sources. You must use them in the ways we've just studied, which are quotation, paraphrase, and summary. So some people, I could clearly tell that they were making sure that they checked off those boxes. A lot of people had only quotation, and a few people had no references to sources at all. Format your paper. At this point in the course, I should not be having to say this too much. You are supposed to be formatting your paper in accordance to the guidelines of Turabian or APA. And if you're not doing that, that's like a 10-point deduction on a 100-point paper at the final. So it just takes a little work. Go back to week 1, week 2, and see some of those sources on APA and Turabian. Also, OWL at Purdue. There are several other university websites that provide really good material. Make sure that you are heading your paper properly. Make sure that you are citing properly, and make sure that your works cited or reference page is correctly done. The elements of writing. So I talked about a minute ago that your thesis will probably address, or the aims of your paper will probably address, the motivations for writing as a Christian, and also maybe what the value of that is. But the other part, it should address how we do that. And to do that, you might want to look at the varied elements of writing or tools of writing we've discussed in this course. I only saw a few papers actually mention these things. And this also is an opportunity for you to engage the sources in the reading that has been provided in this course. So some tools to consider that a Christian writer should use include like word choice, thesis writing, use of sources, use and selection of detail, selection of example, pre-writing, planning, revision, peer review. I think peer review is a great one to write about. How should a Christian engage this concept of peer review? I think that Christians should be better at that than anybody else, because we should be caring about the people we review on a deep level. I had one student write about ethos, logos, and pathos. Those are great tools to use if you can write about them. They're broader categories, so there are specific things that a Christian writer would do to establish ethos, such as good word choice, restrained tone. There are things that a writer would do to establish logos, use of facts, logical reasoning, theoretical reasoning, historic allusion. And there's things that a Christian writer could do to use pathos. But how much pathos should we use? That's a question you might answer. And attention to audience. This one, attention to audience, I saw a few people either talk about that directly or kind of dance around that that issue. It's really a key one for the philosophy of Christian writing, I think, because if you as a writer are attuned to your audience, it's going to change so much about the way you write, particularly if you're writing to a Christian or non-Christian audience or an academic or non-academic audience. So think about that. The prompt does say you can write about creative writing and other types of writing, but it does advise you to write primarily about academic writing. So I didn't see that a lot. I saw people referring to famous books, Christian authors, but not this sense of how are you, a student at Southeastern, going to use your philosophy of Christian writing to write academic papers. Your audience, I just talked about that a little bit, but keep in mind the various ways that a writer can demonstrate that he or she is aware of or sensitive to his or her audience. The selection of image, the discussion of image. What do you assume the author or the audience knows? The use of examples, the level of your diction, sentence structure, and use of research. All of these are tools of the writer to demonstrate that you understand audience, and there are more. I just gave you a brief list there. Grammatical errors. It wasn't that bad for this draft, but the four that I found the most commonly were agreement errors, particularly pronoun antecedent agreement errors. A lot of you are writing about singular units. You might say something like when an individual, so you say individual, but then you follow that noun, an individual, with a pronoun their. So when an individual uses their. So your antecedent is an individual, so your pronoun should also be in the singular form. So a sentence like that should say, when an individual uses this technique, he or she, okay? So if you have agreement errors marked on your paper, you want to correct those. And I did not mark every single grammatical error by far on every paper. I try to draw your attention to representative errors with the idea that you are going to now do a close reading of that paper and check for those things. I saw quite a few apostrophes for possessive errors. I think sometimes students are using contractions instead of possessives or mixing those two up. So proofread for that. I saw some run-ons and comma errors. If I have a different type of error marked on your paper, you still want to attend to that. But let's proofread these well. Get an outside proofreader if you can, or an outside reviewer, so that you can turn in your best product. One of the last points I want to make is this distinction about what actually is Christian writing. And a lot of you make the contention that Christian writing is only writing that features Christian content. But I want to open your way of thinking that maybe a philosophy of Christian writing can be also about a Christian who is writing and not always writing expressly Christian material, specifically because the prompt asked you to write about academic things, or academic writing. So how would a Christian approach a paper, say on, classification keys in biology? Or how would a Christian approach a paper on a topic in history about the Roman Empire? These are not expressly Christian topics, but still it is a Christian writing, and I don't think that you want to divorce yourself, who you are as a Christian, from that process. So what are some of the ways that you can think about a Christian philosophy of writing as it pertains to all kinds of writing, not just to writing that features expressly Christian content? I think it's okay that you wrote about expressly Christian content, but I think what you're going to be asked to do at Southeastern and in your careers, largely it's going to be prompted by secular context. I don't know that I like that division so much, the sacred versus the secular distinction, but I think that that's what a lot of students were making. They were talking about a Christian philosophy of writing when you were writing to witness or when you were writing to create a sermon. But there's much more to that. And most of the writing you're going to do is not going to have that expressly Christian content in college, unless you're a missions or theology major. And it's okay. It's okay that you included that, but I wanted to challenge you. And I tried to write that comment on a lot of paper, but it's one that I thought deserved some voice discussion, that you can write as a Christian and not write about Christian content. So expressly Christian versus secular, I hit that. I think here to your purpose as a Christian writer may be the same whether your content is expressly Christian or more secular. It is to be clear. It is to be persuasive. It is to elevate truth. It is to encourage. So a lot of these purposes can remain the same even when the content produced is different. We talked about motivation, what motivates a Christian writer. I think that's one of the key differences when you're looking at a philosophy of Christian writing versus just a philosophy of writing, and that our motivation, what we value as Christians or as believers, is probably different. So that is something that could show up when you're making that distinction. And if you cite a text, a Christian text or a secular text, and it can be either, and you want to say how that text exemplifies a philosophy of Christian writing, you need to tell why. I'm sorry, I'll see if I can correct that. Cannot. Sorry, excuse me. Let me get right back to that if I can. There you go. So I want you to tell me why it exemplifies a philosophy of Christian writing. I had several people cite text that were not from our class, which is fine. Like, let's say you thought C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces is a great example of Christian writing. Well, why? What did Lewis do as a writer who is a Christian to demonstrate that philosophy? So make sure your examples really help your audience get it. And remember that your examples that you use in your paper, whether they're from your own experience, the experience of a professional writer, or from one of the books or the sources you read in this class, that your examples are there to clarify understanding for your reader. You, the writer, already understand what you want to say, and you've probably said it in abstract words or with a claim, but those examples are the concrete reinforcement. With your audience in mind, you're thinking, what example can I give this audience that will help them understand what I'm saying? So think about that. And be sure you support with your claims of specific examples. Kind of overlaps from what I just said. The examples can be drawn from your own work, from the writing of others. I do really feel like you should be using something that was given you in the course, whether that's the in conversation text or some of the links to the writing comments. But these are tools that have been provided for you that we'd like to see you use. I think that's it. Please reach out this week if you need anything. Thank you for all your hard work. I'm all caught up with all my grading in the course, and I'll start to get to work on week 7 as soon as I can. I have another class I've got to finish up for this week, and thank you for your patience. I got a little behind around week 2 or 3 when our whole family got sick, and as some of you know, when you get behind, it takes a while to catch up, but we did it. So have a great week, and again, reach out if you need some help.